I had the privilege of spending some time with Alex Ferguson at Glasgow Caledonian University, which was an incredible experience. So when he retired, he said to his son Jason, I'd really like to back a charity somewhere that's close to my heart. And he said, well, you should do it in Scotland. You have to do it in Glasgow. So he started a scholarship system at Glasgow Cali where people from underprivileged backgrounds get a chance to go to university. And it's amazing. He put £250,000 in of his own dough the other night just to keep it going. They're looking to get 150 more scholarships through this year. And it's amazing. He still has that presence, doesn't he? Even though he's 84, 83, 84.
84 New Year's Eve, he is,
84 New Year's Eve. And again, just to be in his presence. And he was on great form, making jokes, having a laugh, telling brilliant stories. He told a great story about going back to Govan after he'd won the Champions League. And there was a massive queue for his favourite bakery. And he tried to walk past the queue, and the woman went, "Get to the fucking back now." And he was like, and he thought, actually, that's why I come for Govan.
Yeah, right.
But it was really inspirational. And again, in the context of everything that's happened at Man United, you can it's sad to see that kind of drop of his shoulders at what's going on. But Ian, you've covered Man United for 20 years on and off now.
Yeah.
How do you appraise Amarim's first year, because that's his anniversary?
I'll tell you what, mate. Given that you've introduced this in the context of Sir Alex Ferguson, let's continue that for a second. And if I ask myself, what would he do, or what would he think if he was in charge of? If he walked into that dressing room tomorrow, said, "Right, this is your team."
Yeah.
What would he do? What would he think? I think the first thing he would think was, "I haven't got enough good players," because I think it's just fundamental to where United are. Can't win football matches without good players, and they haven't got enough good players. So he would think that. He would think to himself, what's the mentality of some of these players? What's the personality of some of these players? How much resilience have they got? What are they like when things are going against them? It's okay to look at players when things are going well. What are they like when things are going against them? And then he would ask himself, and he'd probably reach the conclusion that there was some work to be done there. And for himself, he'd probably think, what am I going to do? What am I going to do to change, to impact this group of players? And I think what the first thing he would do was think, I have to be prepared to compromise and be flexible to get the most out of these group of players. And you know where I'm going with that, because obviously Ruben Amorim, rather famously already after a year, will not compromise. He will not. He does not do in-game tactical changes, and it's costing him. So where are they after a year? Let me say this. They're not where they should be. Yeah. If somebody had said a year ago this will be Ruben Amorim's year, this is what will happen, that will happen, that will happen, that will happen, I think a lot of people, everybody would say, well, that's not what we've been hired for. That's disappointing. It's below par. Secondly, you'd be very, very fortunate to still be here. I think all those things are fair. But what I will say about United, and one of the things that baffles me about United and the way that United are talked about in my industry, in our industry, but also out on the street among football supporters, is they are talked about in such a strange way. There is far too much emotion around everything that happens at Manchester United. And what I'll say is, so they're in the dumps. They get knocked out of the FA League Cup by Grimsby. They're struggling. They get beaten at Brentford, and it's like, right, he's got to be sacked. He's on his way. This isn't good enough. Then they win at Anfield. Fair play. They win at Anfield.
And they won well.
They won well, but equally, they could have lost that game.
Yeah.
I remember that game. They could have lost that game, but they didn't. They won that game, okay? And then they win another game at home to Brighton, and then they get two squeaky draws away with late goals, one at Forest, one at Tottenham. And all of a sudden, the narrative is they've turned the corner. They've risen from the depths of despair post-Grimsby. He's finding his way. And I'm looking at it thinking... Nah. I'm looking at it thinking, why? The squad hasn't changed. And then, of course, and all of a sudden, I'm seeing Jason Wilcox, the technical director, on a Man United podcast, talking about how to do a transfer. And I'm thinking, this is a football club that's pretty much written the rules on how not to do transfers. Yeah. Now, not to be fair in the Wilcox era, but fair enough.
You talked about this recently, didn't you? Some of the chat behind the scenes.
And then
how they messed up.
And then I hear people saying, "Oh, things are much better now because the players are turning up half an hour early for training," and you're just thinking, "This is bullshit. It's bullshit. Yeah, things are getting. Yeah. You have done well in the last month, but this is this." And then what happens? They get beaten at home
before a fall
at Everton, and all of a sudden, it's the other story. Sack him. They're not good enough. Get rid of that player. And this is the thing with United. There never seems to be any kind of steady path through the middle.
Can I ask what it was like refereeing a Fergie team? You talked about playing refereeing games, so it was so quick from back to front for Real Madrid, for instance. But what was it like refereeing the United in their pomp? Because you'd have got them.
It depends where they were. So at home, it was different. Man United at home was different to away.
Right.
Man United at home, they tried to put pressure on you.
Right. On
as
you?
a ref, yeah. They were always wanting the next decision.
Yeah.
And it was one after another. Yeah, it was one after another. Mm-hmm. They would send one in, Gary Neville. The next one would be Rio Ferdinand. The next one would be Paul Scholes. They did it systematically because it wasn't to change your decision, because every player knew you're not going to change your decision because it was pre-VAR. Yeah. It was more for the next one, the next one, the next one. And they eat away at you to try and break your steel to try and get that one decision that wins the football match. Mm-hmm. Away from home, they were completely different. Yeah. The pressure was different. Yeah. But Man United had this, and I've spoken to players about this, ex-players. Said, what was it? Because we used to chat, what was it like going to Old Trafford? They used to say, we're travelling in on the team coach, and you knew you were going to lose. Mm. They knew they were going in to a cauldron knowing they were going to lose. As a referee, because it was one of the biggest stadiums at that time, you were probably, that was the biggest crowd in the Premier League. Yeah. What, 76,000 was it at the time?
Yeah, yeah.
It was the biggest. Wasn't the noisiest, but it was certainly the biggest stadium, and the pressure that, and because it was Manchester United, one of the world famous clubs, you knew the following outside of that was incredible. So
just out of interest, of all the players you're close to, who was the one that stood out for you?
Which for Manchester
Man United, yeah.
I would. Rio Ferdinand was always always chirping away. Yeah, and they always
from a referee's point of view, of
course. Because when you were a young referee or a new referee, they knew that, and Sir Alex would have been behind that chat to say put pressure on him. He's new, he's young, and the longer that went on, I've had some run-ins with Sir Alex, and I've had some great fun with Alex outside and inside the pitch. But if you crossed him, you
knew all about it. Aye.
And he was the. And you're not allowed to do it now because you get charged by the FA, don't you? But he was one of the first. Mourinho said, didn't he, when he was at Real Madrid, that the game started in the press conference, and Fergie was probably the first of that. And he would, back in the day when I was covering United regularly under Fergie, he would drop those little bombs into press conferences on a Friday about a referee if it was a big game. Somebody would ask him. It might even be a planted question. I don't know. I was never asked I was never asked by the club to ask a question. Occasionally, there was the odd question asked by someone that did make me wonder, and he'd be, what do you expect from the referee on Saturday, Alex? And he wouldn't have to say a lot. He'd just say big game for him.
Does that feel through you?
Big game for the boy.
Yeah, because I had to send him off in a game at half time at Bolton because Kevin Davies was allegedly kicking Patrice up in the end. So Alex wasn't happy. Yeah. It was always like we talked about Bolton. It was always physical, the referee at Bolton. And Patrice Eva was getting a little bit of underhand treatment off Kevin Davies. So I've come in and I'm going down the tunnel at half time, and so Alex has just volleyed us, upset. And I thought, I'm not having that. So I've said, I'm sending you off. The policewoman went white because I said, you've got to tell him he's not coming out for the second half. She said, I'm not telling him. So I was got one of the coaching staff. I'm not accepting him in the technical area for the second half. What he said to us. Okay, then so he doesn't come out for the second half. So he gets interviewed after the match to win, and he gets interviewed. And they said, what did you say to the referee? And he says, it doesn't matter what I said, but he clearly listened because he had a better performance in the second half. Clever. Because you know why? Because they've won. Yeah. He can't control what's happened, but he's certainly wanting the next one.
The policewoman refused to tell him?
She was refused. She was shaking because
he's above the law. I always thought he was.
I was laughing because she was scared of him.
What a story! Here's the thing, right? Simple question: are Manchester United further forward after a year of Amorim, or have they gone backwards?
I think with the signings of Cunha and Mbeumo, and a better goalkeeper, I think they are an improvement in a player like Mason Mount and the continued form of someone like Bruno Fernandes. I think they probably are slightly further forward, but we're talking fine margins here, Gordon. We know that this is a Premier League season so far, of only one exceptional team, and that's been Arsenal. Everybody else is just flailing around. Liverpool keep losing. City have lost again. United is still halfway up the table. Opportunity is there, and they're still unable to take it.
I have to say, but a bit of credit where it's due. I really find Paul Scholes and Nicky Butt interesting talking about football.
Incredibly dry, Scholes.
They're great crack. The pair of them, great crack. Yeah. But at the story about ringing up for your season ticket and Scholesy buying a bloody ticket from a tout to go and see Manchester United.
Incredible.
My initial reaction was, that's terrible. But Ian, do you think that's the soul of the club missing now? Do you think it's changed so much? Because that goes back to Fergie as well. Kathy that used to sit and do she's notorious amongst the Scottish guys because she used to look after everybody that came through from up north. But that heart of the club appears to have disappeared under Ratcliffe.
I'm sighing because it's a really difficult one. I know other clubs that I could talk about who've taken tickets away from people who, as far as I'm concerned, should be free. Should be guests for life. Maybe talk about that on another podcast. But but on this particular issue, it's so difficult because your heart says, of course, she's got to be welcome back. Treble winners, class of '92, local boys. My goodness. Okay,
450 appearances, Nicky Butts.
But the gap between, and I'll describe them as a class of '92 for the sake of it, Beckham and his mates. The gap between them and the club has been growing wider for quite a long time. We can talk, United have made a mistake by not keeping them closer. United would argue that, well, hang on a minute, they built a hotel on our doorstep on land that we wanted to build a hotel on. They did that. They criticise us constantly in the media, and they do. I sat with Nicky Butt for an interview when he was director of football at Salford shortly after he'd left Manchester United. Great interview. Nicky was very accommodating. Great interview for me because Nicky said quite a bit of negative stuff about Manchester United and the people who we'd worked with before. Scholes is blunt as they come, as we know, incredibly honest. Gary Neville's on Sky every weekend. There's so much that has been done and said that if part of me thinks, if I'm Manchester United, I would think, well, hang on a minute.
You can't unburn toast,
where are we? Where's the, where does this jigsaw fit together now?
Great point.
And
it's an interesting one, isn't it?
And I just think they've drifted apart.
They have,
and that's sad.
Yeah.
And that now look, Gary's involved, as we know, he's on the task force for the new stadium. Okay, we know that. But in terms of the modern day running of the football club, they've drifted apart. That shouldn't have happened. I was with somebody about a year or so ago, 18 months ago, from Manchester United, talking about this very issue. And I said, I think if you reached out to Nicky Butt and Paul Scholes, those are the two that I mentioned, there might be a bit of a handshake to be had. Yeah. This guy said to me, "Have you got the numbers?" Didn't have the numbers.